The chamber was silent except for the low hum of translation devices. 12 species sat around the circular table, their faces showing fear and anger in equal measure. Above them, a holographic display showed the devastation. 7 worlds had fallen in 3 months. The Krevter Armada was coming, and nothing could stop them. Ambassador Taemin watched the images with a heavy heart. He had seen war before, but this was different. The Krevter did not just kill their enemies. They transformed them. A single biological weapon would sweep across a planet, and within days, millions of people would become mindless servants of the Armada. Entire civilizations erased. Their bodies still walking, but their souls gone forever. High Chancellor Volm stood at the center of the chamber. His tall, insect-like body moved with stiff dignity as he addressed the council. "We have lost contact with Meridian 4, he announced. "That brings our total losses to 42 billion lives." The number hung in the air like a curse. 42 billion. "We must seek additional military support," said one of the council members, a being made of crystalline structures that chimed when it spoke. "Our forces cannot hold them alone." "Agreed," another voice added. "We should contact the Vryn Empire. They have the firepower we need." "The Vryn are 3 months away," Volm replied. "We do not have 3 months." Taemin felt his assistant Jiwoo shift beside him. She was young for a tactical officer, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen too much death. She leaned close and whispered, "They are going to mention Earth." She was right. A council member from the aquatic Delphini species raised a tentacle. "There is one military power within 2 weeks' travel. The humans have proven their combat effectiveness in the past. Perhaps we should know." Volm's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "That option is not available." Taemin stood slowly. "With respect, Chancellor, Earth has the closest military presence and the most experience fighting biological threats. We could have ships here and we are aware of human capabilities, Ambassador." Volm's compound eyes fixed on him. "We are also aware of human disregard for diplomatic protocol." The chamber grew tense. Everyone remembered the Sector 7 war, 20 years ago. A conflict had erupted between 2 minor species over trade routes. It had escalated quickly, threatening to consume a dozen worlds. The council had debated for weeks while the killing continued. Then the humans arrived. Without permission. Without invitation. They had simply appeared in the middle of the war zone and imposed a ceasefire through overwhelming force. They stopped the killing in 3 days and left immediately after. Millions of lives saved, but the council had been humiliated. The primitive humans had solved in days what the council could not solve in weeks. "The Sector 7 incident was a violation of our authority," Volm continued. "The humans acted without authorization. They made us look weak." "They made us look slow," Taemin corrected. "Because we were slow. People died while we debated. That is not the point." Volm's mandibles clicked in agitation. "This council cannot function if member species simply act on their own whenever they disagree with our decisions. We established rules after Sector 7. Humans are not to engage in military operations within council space without explicit authorization. That includes this crisis." Giwoo's hand tightened on her data tablet. Taemin could feel her anger radiating like heat. "I propose a formal decree," Volm announced. "No member of this council shall request or facilitate human military intervention in the current crisis. We will handle the Krevter threat through proper channels and with forces under council authority." The vote was quick. 9 species agreed. Only 3 opposed, including the humans and the Delphini. It was not enough. Tae-Min felt something break inside his chest. He stood again, his voice carefully controlled. "Chancellor, I ask you to reconsider. Pride should not. This discussion is closed, Ambassador." Volm turned away. "You are hereby ordered to ensure Earth remains uninformed about the full scope of this crisis. No requests for aid will be transmitted. No intelligence will be shared. The humans will not be involved. Even if we lose?" Taemin asked quietly. Volm paused. For a moment, his alien features seemed almost sad. "Even then." Some defeats are preferable to certain humiliations. The session ended. Species filed out of the chamber, their conversations muted and grim. Taemin stood alone at his position, staring at the holographic display. Another world had just gone dark while they talked. Ji Woo approached him carefully. "Ambassador, what do we do?" "We follow orders," he said, though the words felt like poison. "We inform Earth that the situation is under control. We tell them their help is not needed, but it is needed." Her voice was barely a whisper. "They are dying out there. Billions of them, I know." Taemin closed his eyes. "But the decree is law. We have no choice." Giwu was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Tae-Min did not see her pause at her workstation. He did not see her pull up the classified intelligence files about the Krevter advance. He did not see her fingers hovering over the communication controls, trembling with indecision. What he did see was the holographic display. Another planet turning red. Another billion lives in danger. In her office, Jiwoo stared at the screen. She thought about the decree. She thought about orders and laws and diplomatic protocol. Then she thought about 42 billion dead, and all the billions more who would die while the council debated. Her fingers stopped trembling. She began to type. By the time Taemin returned to his quarters that night, a highly encrypted data packet was already moving through the communication network. It would take a week to reach its destination. The recipient was listed as unknown, but Jiwoo knew exactly where it was going. She deleted the transmission log and went home. That night, she did not sleep well. But when she closed her eyes, she did not see the faces of the dead accusing her of treason. She saw them thanking her for trying. The message arrived at Luna Base 3 weeks after the Council's decree. Young-Soo had been monitoring routine communications when his system flagged an encrypted packet hidden within normal traffic. At first, he thought it was a test. Earth intelligence often ran simulations to keep analysts sharp, but when he decrypted the file, his blood went cold. The data was extensive. Tactical reports, biological weapon analyses, casualty projections. The Krevter Armada was not just a threat to Council space anymore. If they maintained their current speed and direction, they would reach the outer human colonies in 6 months. Maybe less. Young-Soo recognized the encryption signature. He had worked with Jiwoo during a joint training exercise 5 years ago. She was careful, methodical, and absolutely loyal to the Council's rules. If she was breaking protocol to send this, the situation was desperate. He copied the data 3 times, stored it in separate secure locations, then walked quickly to his commander's office. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. This was the kind of information that started wars or prevented them. Admiral Kyungmi read the report in silence. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 decades of military service. When she finished, she set the tablet down carefully, as if it might explode. "This is classified Council intelligence," she said quietly. "We should not have it." "No, ma'am." "But we do. If we act on this, we are starting an incident." The Council was very clear that human forces are not to intervene. Young-Soo met her gaze. "If we do not act, we are accepting that millions will die, including our own people, eventually." Kim-mi stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the black sky, blue and green and beautiful. She had spent her entire life protecting that world and everyone on it. "Get me a secure line to the expeditionary fleet," she said finally. "And find out where Captain Dong-Hyun is right now?" Captain Dong-Hyun was supervising repairs on the UESV Indomitable when the orders came through. His ship was one of 12 in the 3rd Expeditionary Group, currently running training exercises near the border between human and Council space. They were officially testing new engine configurations and running combat drills. Unofficially, they were close enough to reach Council space in 3 days if necessary. Dong-Hyun read the encrypted orders twice, then called his senior staff to the bridge. Engineer Hyjin arrived first, wiping grease from her hands. She had been deep in the engine room as usual. Behind her came the tactical officer, the medical officer, and the rest of his command crew. "We have new orders," Dong-Hyun announced. The Council is facing a biological warfare threat that could spread to human space. We are being redeployed to observe the situation. His tactical officer frowned. Observe? Not engage? Correct. Observe only. We are to maintain position near the border and monitor the situation. Dong Haiyan paused, letting that sink in. Then he added, We will observe from a position between the threat and human colonies, and we will drift closer to Council space over the next few days. For better observation. Haijin understood immediately. Her eyes widened. Sir, if we drift too close, we might accidentally find ourselves in the middle of something, Dong Haiyan finished. I am aware. But our orders are to monitor the threat. We cannot monitor effectively from too far away. The crew exchanged glances. They all knew what this meant. They were being given permission to help without actually being given permission. If things went wrong, Earth could deny everything. The expeditionary fleet was simply training in the area and responded to an emergency. How close are we going to drift, Captain? His tactical officer asked. Close enough, Dong Haiyan replied. Start preparations. I want the fleet ready for combat operations within 6 hours. Haijin, check all weapon systems and get the countermeasure equipment online. If we encounter biological weapons, I want us ready. Yes, sir. Haijin hesitated. Captain, the Council specifically forbade human intervention. If we engage, we are not engaging. We are drifting. What happens after that is simply circumstance. The crew dispersed to their tasks. Dong Haiyan remained on the bridge, staring at the star charts. The Krevdor Armada was 3 days away from another major colony world. Council forces were preparing a defense, but intelligence suggested they would fail. 40 million people lived on that world. He thought about the decree. He thought about orders and diplomatic consequences. Then he thought about 40 million people becoming mindless slaves because the Council was too proud to ask for help. Navigation, he called. Set course for the border. Maximum speed. Yes, sir. Should I file a flight plan? Dong Haiyan smiled grimly. No, I think we will keep our movements private for now. The Indomitable's engines flared to life. Behind it, 11 other ships followed. They moved silently through space, transponders dark, heading toward a war they were not supposed to fight. Back on Luna Base, Young Su monitored their progress. He had done his part. He had delivered the information to the people who could act on it. Now he could only wait and hope. Admiral Kyungmi stood beside him, watching the fleet's trajectory on the tactical display. They are not just drifting, she observed. They are sprinting, yes, ma'am. If the Council finds out we facilitated this, they will complain loudly, Young Su interrupted. And then they will be too busy being alive to do much else. Kyungmi almost smiled. You sound very confident that our people will succeed. I am confident they will try. And that is more than the Council is doing right now. The Admiral nodded slowly. She pulled up a second screen and began typing. I am authorizing the 2nd Battle Group to begin similar training exercises near the border. For observation purposes. Young Su understood. If the 3rd Expeditionary Group needed backup, it would be available. Earth was not sending an invasion force. They were simply moving assets into position. For training. For observation, for whatever came next, 3 days later, when the Krevdor attacked the colony world of Taranthos VI, the Council forces scrambled to respond. They were outmatched and overwhelmed. The biological weapon was deployed, and evacuation ships struggled to reach the planet's surface. Then 12 unknown ships appeared on sensors, moving at combat speed. No transponder codes, no identification. Just a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. Attention Krevdor vessels. You are firing on civilians? Cease immediately or we will engage. The Krevdor did not cease. They never did, and so the humans who were not supposed to be there, who had been forbidden to help, opened fire. Captain Dong Haiyan watched the tactical display light up with weapons fire. His ship shuddered as it took hits, but the shields held. Around him his crew worked with practiced efficiency. Haijin, he called. Deploy the countermeasures. Stop that biological weapon before it spreads. Already on it, Captain. The battle had begun, and somewhere in the council chamber, alarms were starting to sound. The evacuation of Taranthos Vale was failing. General Vex watched the tactical display with growing horror as his ships tried desperately to reach the planet's surface. The Krevdor had deployed their weapon 30 minutes ago. Already, reports were coming in of people collapsing in the streets, their minds consumed by the biological agent. "We need more time," his tactical officer reported. "At least 2 hours to evacuate the primary cities." "We do not have 2 hours," Dex replied grimly. The Krevdor fleet was moving into position to bombard the evacuation sites. His own forces were too badly damaged to stop them. "Pull back our ships. Save who we can." "Sir, that leaves 20 million people on the surface." Vex's mandibles clicked in anguish. "I am aware. But if we stay, we lose everyone, including our ships." "Pull back," the order was given. Council ships began retreating, carrying a fraction of the people they had hoped to save. On the surface, civilians looked up at the sky and saw their rescue leaving. Some screamed. Others simply sat down and waited for the weapon to reach them. Then the sensors went crazy. "Sir, unknown contacts." The tactical officer's voice cracked with surprise. 12 ships, no identification, emerging from FTL. Vex stared at the display. The newcomers were not council vessels. The design was wrong, the formation unfamiliar. They moved with aggressive confidence, accelerating toward the Krevdor fleet at combat speed. "Hail them," Vex ordered. "Identify who they are." Before his communications officer could respond, a message broadcast across all frequencies. "Attention Krevdor vessels. You are firing on civilians. Cease immediately or we will engage." The voice was human. Vex felt a rush of emotions he could not name: relief, anger, confusion. The decree had been clear. Humans were not supposed to be here. But here they were, and suddenly his people had a chance. The Krevdor did not respond to the warning. They never did. They simply continued their attack. Unconcerned with threats, the human ships opened fire. Vex had seen human combat tactics before, during joint exercises years ago. He remembered thinking they were reckless, too aggressive, too willing to take damage to achieve objectives. Now, watching them tear into the Krevdor formation, he understood. They were not reckless. They were committed. A human destroyer took heavy fire to shield one of his carriers. The destroyer's hull glowed red from energy impacts, but it did not retreat. It just kept firing, kept blocking, kept protecting. "All ships," Vex heard himself say. "Coordinate with the unknown fleet. Resume evacuation operations." His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, we do not have authorization to—" "I do not care about authorization," Vex shouted. "Our people are dying. Coordinate with them now." The Council and human ships began working together with surprising efficiency. The humans drove the Krevdor back while Vex's forces ran evacuation shuttles to the surface. It was desperate, chaotic, but it was working on the Indomitable's bridge. Captain Dohayan monitored the battle with intense focus. His ship had taken damage, but nothing critical. Around him, his crew worked without complaint, adapting to the enemy's tactics as they fought. "Hi, Jin," he called. "Status on the biological weapon?" The engineer's voice came through clearly despite the battle. "Deploying countermeasures now, Captain. I modified our atmospheric scrubbers to produce a neutralizing agent. If I am right, we can stop the weapon before it spreads beyond the primary cities. If you are right? Well, if I am wrong, we will know in about 5 minutes when nothing happens." Dong Haiyan almost smiled. "Deploy it." Haijin's team launched a series of drones that descended into Taranthos Viz atmosphere. Each drone carried tanks of the neutralizing agent, spraying it across the affected areas. The biological weapon worked by airborne transmission, converting victims through contact. If they could saturate the air with the countermeasure, they could stop its spread. Medical Officer Jawa watched the data feeds anxiously from the medical bay. She had helped Haijin develop the countermeasure based on human immune responses. The Krefter weapon was similar to several Earth diseases that humans had conquered centuries ago. Similar but not identical. If the modification was wrong, it would not work. 5 minutes passed. Then reports started coming in from the surface. People who had been exposed but not yet converted were remaining conscious. The weapon was not spreading. Hyjin's countermeasure was working. "It is stopping," Jawo reported. "The weapon is neutralized." A cheer went up across the bridge. But Donghyan did not celebrate yet. The battle was still raging, and the Krefter were adapting to the human tactics. "Incoming!" His tactical officer shouted. A Krefter dreadnought was targeting them, its weapons charging. Donghyan's ship was out of position, shields weakened from protecting the evacuation shuttles. They would not survive a direct hit. Then a council cruiser moved between them and the dreadnought. General Vex's voice came through the communication system. "Human vessel, fall back. We will cover you." The cruiser took the blast meant for the Indomitable. Its shields flared and died, but the ship held together. Vex's crew returned fire, driving the dreadnought back. "Thank you," Donghyan transmitted. "Do not thank me yet," Vex replied. "Just keep fighting." The battle continued for 3 more hours. It was brutal and exhausting. Ships from both sides took damage. Lives were lost. But slowly, impossibly, the Krefter began to retreat. They had expected an easy victory and instead found coordinated resistance they could not overcome. When the last Krefter ship jumped away, the silence was startling. 40 million people had been saved. The biological weapon had been stopped. The planet was secure. General Vex stood on his damaged bridge and looked at the human ships on his display. They had come without being asked. They had fought without expecting thanks. They had risked everything for people they did not even know. "Get me a communication line to the human commander," he ordered. When the connection opened, Vex saw Captain Donghyan for the first time. He looked young and tired, his uniform scorched from a console fire. But his eyes were clear. "Identify yourself," Vex demanded, though his tone was not harsh. "You have no transponder codes." "No authorization." "Who are you?" Donghyan smiled slightly. "We were passing through, General." It seemed rude not to help. Passing through a war zone? "We have bad navigation systems." Despite everything, Vex found himself almost laughing. "The Council will demand answers." There was a decree. Humans were forbidden to intervene. "I am aware of the decree, General." Donghyan's smile faded. "I am also aware of 40 million people who would be dead if we had followed it. I will accept whatever consequences come." Vex was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "You saved my people. Whatever the politicians decide, I will not forget that." The communication ended. Vex turned to his crew and began organizing relief efforts for the planet below. But his mind was elsewhere, thinking about courage and rules and the humans who had broken every law to do what was right. In the council chamber, alarms were screaming. High Chancellor Volm stared at the battle reports with his compound eyes wide with shock and rage. "Get me Ambassador Taemin," he ordered. Immediately. The summons had come. The reckoning was beginning, but on Taranthos Ve, 40 million people were looking up at the sky where human ships patrolled, keeping them safe. And they did not care about decrees or politics or diplomatic consequences. They were simply grateful to be alive. The council chamber felt like a courtroom. Ambassador Taemin stood at the center alone, while 12 species sat in judgment around him. High Chancellor Volm's voice was cold with controlled fury. "Explain to this council why human military forces engaged in combat operations within council space despite explicit orders forbidding such action." Taemin kept his expression neutral. He had known this moment would come. The 3rd Expeditionary Group was conducting training exercises near the border. When they detected a distress situation, they responded as any military force would. Training exercises. Volm's mandibles clicked. "Your ships were 3 days inside our border. That is not training. That is invasion. That is rescue," Taemin corrected quietly. 40 million people are alive because of that invasion. That is not the point. Another council member, a reptilian species called the Corthan, slammed a scaled hand on the table. We established rules. Your people broke them. This is exactly why we created the decree after Sector 7. Humans do not respect our authority. We respect life more than authority, Taman replied. Perhaps that is our failing. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some council members agreed with the Corthan. Others, particularly those whose worlds bordered Krevter space, were quieter. They had seen the casualty reports. They knew how close they had come to losing Taranthos. Vol raised a hand for silence. Ambassador Taman, this council demands assurances that human forces will withdraw immediately and will not interfere again. The decree stands. Taman looked at each council member in turn. Then he spoke, his voice carrying across the chamber. How many of those 40 million souls would you like me to apologize to for saving their lives? The silence was absolute. I will draft a formal apology, Taman continued. I will visit Taranthos personally and explain to the survivors that we broke protocol by rescuing them. I will tell the children who still have parents that we should have left their families to die because a decree said so. Would you like me to do that, Chancellor? Volm's compound eyes glittered. You are being disrespectful. I am being honest. The decree was never about protecting council authority. It was about protecting council pride. And pride is a poor reason to let billions die. Before Volm could respond, alarms sounded throughout the chamber. The tactical display activated, showing 3 new crisis points. The Krevter were attacking simultaneously on 3 fronts, stretching council forces to the breaking point. General Vex's voice came through the communication system, tense with urgency. Chancellor, we need reinforcements at all 3 locations. We cannot hold them alone. Volm stared at the display, his earlier anger replaced by fear. Deploy available reserves. We have no reserves, Dex replied. Everything we have is already committed. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of dawning horror. They were losing. The decree had cost them time, resources, and positioning. Now they were paying for that pride with worlds. Taman's communication device chimed. He glanced at it and saw a message from Captain Dong Hyon requesting permission to assist. Permission that Taman could not give under the decree. He looked up at Volm. My forces are requesting orders, Chancellor. What should I tell them? Tell them to stay out of council space, Volm said, but his voice lacked conviction. Even if your worlds fall? Even then. Taman nodded slowly. He typed a response to Dong Hyon. Request denied. Remain at current position. What he did not include was any order to not act on their own initiative. Sometimes silence was permission. 3 hours later, human ships engaged at all 3 crisis points. Not just the expeditionary group, but reinforcements that had been moving toward the border over the past weeks. Admiral Kyungmi herself led the 2nd battle group, 20 ships strong. They did not ask for permission. They simply fought. Ambassador Sora arrived at the council chamber that evening. She was Earth's senior diplomatic representative, a woman who had negotiated treaties with 15 species and never lost her calm. She walked directly to the council floor without being invited. The human delegation wishes to make a formal statement, she announced. Volm looked like he wanted to refuse. But too many council members were interested. He nodded stiffly. Sora stood where Taman had stood and spoke clearly. Earth acknowledges that our forces have operated within council space without explicit authorization. We also acknowledge that this has violated the decree established after Sector 7. We offer no apologies. The chamber exploded with protests. Sora waited for them to quiet before continuing. We do not apologize because we are not sorry. When people are dying and those with the power to help choose not to act, then action without permission becomes a moral imperative. Earth will not stand by and watch genocide because of political embarrassment. You cannot simply ignore our laws. Volm shouted. You cannot simply hide behind laws while people die. Sora shot back. The decree was wrong when you created it, and it is wrong now. Human forces will continue to assist in the defense against the Krevter. If you wish to impose sanctions after the crisis is over, that is your choice. But we will not let politics determine who lives and who dies. Medical Officer Jaywa's breakthrough came at the worst possible time. The Krevter had deployed their biological weapon at 2 of the 3 crisis points, and Council forces had no defense. Jaywa had been working non-stop since Taranthos Vi. Analyzing the weapon and testing countermeasures, she finally found one that worked. The key was in human antibodies. Humans had fought and conquered so many diseases in their history that their immune systems had developed incredibly diverse responses. By modifying a vaccine based on human immune markers, she could create a permanent immunity to the Krevter weapon. "I need to start mass production immediately," she told Captain Dong Hyen. "But I need resources. Medical facilities, manufacturing equipment, distribution networks. Will the Council provide those?" Jaywa laughed bitterly. "The Council will not even admit we should be here." Dong Hyen thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "Contact Admiral Kelmi. Tell her we need the medical ships from Earth, all of them." "Sir, that will take weeks. It will take 3 days if we use military transport." "Do it." Within 72 hours, Earth's medical fleet arrived. Massive hospital ships equipped with manufacturing facilities began producing Jaywa's vaccine by the millions. Human and Council medical personnel worked together, distributing the vaccine to threatened worlds. On the front lines, the fighting intensified. General Vex found himself working alongside human ground forces Commander Minji. She was younger than he expected, barely 30 standard years. But she led her Marines with confidence that came from deep training and deeper conviction. They were defending a Council supply depot when the Krevter launched a ground assault. Vex's troops were exhausted, low on ammunition, and facing overwhelming numbers. He prepared to order a retreat, then Minji's Marines arrived. They dropped from orbit in assault pods, hitting the Krevter from behind with devastating precision. Vex watched in amazement as human soldiers fought with a ferocity he had never witnessed. They did not fight like they were defending their own world. They fought like they were defending their families. When the battle ended, Vex approached Minji. She was tending to a wounded Marine, her hands covered in blue blood from treating one of his own soldiers. "Why?" Vex asked simply. "Why do you fight so hard for people you do not know?" Minji looked up at him with tired eyes. "Because someone needs to. Because it is right. Because if we wait for permission to help, people die while we wait." Vex had no response to that. He simply nodded and helped her carry the wounded to the medical station, the UESV. Dauntless died protecting a Council carrier. The Krevter had targeted the carrier with everything they had, determined to break the defensive line. The Dauntless moved to intercept, taking hit after hit until its shields failed and its hull began to rupture. The captain could have retreated. Should have retreated. Instead, he rammed the Krevter dreadnought, destroying both ships in a massive explosion that saved the carrier and everyone. Aboard. When news of the sacrifice reached the Council chamber, several members wept. These were not their people, not their military, but they had died defending Council lives. High Chancellor Volm sat alone in his office that night, watching casualty reports and battle summaries. Human losses were mounting. They were paying in blood for a war that was not theirs, defending people who had forbidden them to help. His aide entered quietly. "Chancellor, should we formally request human assistance now?" Volm was silent for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, "Would they even care if we did? They are already here. They did not need our permission to do what was right. Perhaps that is the real lesson of all this." He stood and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were dying for Council worlds. And they had come not because they were asked, but because they heard the need itself. Pride, Volm realized, was indeed a poor reason to let billions die. It was an even poorer reason to refuse help when it was freely given. The Nexus Gate was the key to everything. It was an ancient structure built by a civilization long dead that connected the outer Council territories to the core worlds. If the Krevter took the gate, they would have access to the heart of Council space. Trillions of lives hung in the balance. General Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the defensive positions. His forces were exhausted. Weeks of constant fighting had reduced his fleet to half strength. The humans had helped tremendously, but they too were worn down. Ships limped on damaged engines. Crews operated on minimal sleep. Resources were running low, and now the Krevter were committing everything they had to one final assault. "How long until they arrive?" Vex asked his tactical officer. 6 hours, sir. Every ship they have. Our scouts count over 300 vessels. Vex felt a chill run through his body. 300 ships? He had maybe 80 that could still fight, and half of those were barely operational. The math was brutal and simple. They could not win. "Send a message to all ships," he ordered. "Prepare for final stand. We hold the gate for as long as possible." His tactical officer nodded grimly. Everyone knew what final stand meant. They would fight until they died, buying time for civilians to evacuate from the core worlds. It was not much, but it was all they could do. High Chancellor Volm received the report in his private office. He sat in silence, reading the casualty projections, the tactical analysis, the cold mathematical certainty of defeat. The Council's pride had brought them to this moment. Their refusal to ask for help had cost them everything. His hands trembled as he opened a communication channel. He had sworn he would never do this. Never give the humans the satisfaction. But pride meant nothing if everyone was dead. "Connect me to Ambassador Sora," he said quietly. "Private channel?" The ambassador appeared on his screen. She looked tired but alert, ready for another argument. Volm surprised her by speaking first, and his voice was humble. "Ambassador, I am not calling to make a formal request. I'm not calling on behalf of the Council. I'm calling as someone who has watched billions die because of decisions I made." He paused, struggling with words. "We will fall. The gate will be lost. And we will deserve it for our pride. But the innocents behind us, the trillions who had no voice in our decisions, they do not deserve what is coming." Sora studied him for a long moment. Then she said simply, "We know." "The fleet is already in position." Volm's eyes widened. "What? Did you think we would wait for permission, Chancellor?" "We stopped doing that weeks ago." The connection ended. Volm sat in stunned silence, then he began to laugh. It was a bitter, broken sound, but also relieved. The humans had not been waiting for an apology or a request. They had been preparing to fight regardless. At the Nexus Gate, Captain Donghayan watched his sensors as ships began appearing from FTL, human ships. Dozens of them, from every corner of Earth's territory. Not just military vessels. Merchant ships had been retrofitted with weapons. Colony defense forces had abandoned their posts to join the fight. Even civilian transports carried supplies and volunteers. "Captain," his tactical officer reported with awe in his voice, "I am counting over 100 human vessels. And more are still arriving." Donghayan felt something tight in his chest loosen. They still might lose, but at least they would not die alone. "Send a message to all human ships. Coordinate with General Vex's forces. We fight together." Admiral Kyung-mi arrived with the largest group, 25 warships from Earth's home fleet. She had stripped the solar system's defenses to bring them, leaving Earth itself protected by only a skeleton force. It was a massive gamble. If they lost here, Earth would be vulnerable, but if they did not fight here, there would be nowhere safe left to defend. "All ships," Kyung-mi's voice broadcast across every channel. "This is where we hold the line. Not for politics, not for glory, for the simple reason that people behind us need to be protected, for the simple reason that it is right. Show them what humans do when innocent lives are threatened." The Krefter Armada arrived in a wave of fury and violence. 300 ships, all focused on breaking through the gate. Their hive speaker, Gormand, had promised his masters a quick victory. Instead, he found a defensive line that should not exist. Humans, everywhere humans. Ships that should not be there, fighting for a cause that was not theirs. "Destroy them all," Gormand ordered. The battle began. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Ships collided in desperate maneuvers. Weapons fire lit up space like artificial stars. The biological weapon was deployed, but Jay's vaccine protected the defenders. The Crefter's main advantage was gone. Engineer Hyjin worked frantically to keep the Indomitable running. The ship had taken so much damage over the past weeks that it was held together more by desperation than engineering. But she made it work through creativity and refusal to accept failure. "Captain, the starboard engine is failing," she reported. "Can you fix it?" "Not while we are in combat, but I can reroute power from life support to the shields." "We need life support to breathe. We need shields more. I can give you 30 minutes of full power. After that, we hope the battle is over." Dong Hyan did not hesitate. "Do it, 30 minutes. The battle had already lasted 2 hours. 30 more minutes might not be enough, but it was what they had, medical officer." Jawa triaged wounded from both human and council ships. Her medical bay was overwhelmed, with injured on every surface, in every corridor. She worked without stopping, moving from patient to patient, saving who she could, comforting those she could not. A council soldier, his body ravaged by weapon impacts, grabbed her hand. "Why are you here?" he gasped. "Why do humans keep coming?" Jawa squeezed his hand gently. "Because you needed help. That is enough." The soldier died with tears in his eyes. Jawa had no time to mourn. She moved to the next patient on a Krevder command ship. Hive Speaker Gorman watched his forces struggle against the impossible defense. He had never seen anything like this. The humans fought with absolute commitment, throwing themselves into harm's way to protect others. It was irrational, inefficient, beautiful, and terrifying. "Pull back," he ordered suddenly. "Reform the lines." His second-in-command stared. "We have them nearly broken. One more push. Look at them." Gorman gestured at the display showing human ships, battered and dying, still fighting. "They will never stop. Every ship we destroy will be replaced by another. These creatures do not understand surrender when they are protecting others. We cannot win this. The masters will not accept retreat." "Then the masters can come fight them personally." Gorman began issuing orders. The Krevder fleet started pulling back, regrouping. They would attack again, but not today. Not against this defense. Young Su watched from his position on a supply ship. He had volunteered to deliver ammunition to the front lines, unable to sit safely on Luna Base while others fought. His ship was unarmed and slow, but he had carried supplies to 12 different vessels during the battle, keeping them in the fight. Now he saw something that made him smile. The Krevder were retreating. Battered, bloodied, but alive. The defenders had held. The gate was secure. When the last Krevder ship jumped away, the silence was strange. For weeks, there had been constant battle. Now there was only exhaustion and relief. General Dex's voice came across all channels. "All ships, stand down from combat status. Begin damage control and casualty recovery." Then, after a pause, he added, "Human vessels, the Council thanks you." It was not an official statement. It was not politically approved. But it came from the heart. Captain Dong Hyan sat in his damaged chair on his dying ship and felt tears on his face. They had done it. Not because they were ordered to. Not because they were thanked. But because it was right. 2 weeks later, Hive Speaker Gorman was captured during a minor skirmish. He stood before his captors, a mix of council and human forces, and spoke his final words. "You should have let them ask. Pride might have saved you from humiliation. But courage," he looked directly at the human soldiers, "courage saved you from extinction. Remember which one mattered." 1 month after the battle, the council chamber was full. Every species present, every representative watching as High Chancellor Volm stood to speak. "This council owes the human species a debt that cannot be measured," Volm began. His voice was clear and carried no trace of his earlier pride. "We did not ask for help. We forbade it, in fact. And yet help came. Lives were sacrificed. Ships were destroyed, all for people who had rejected them." He paused, looking directly at Ambassador Taemin and Ambassador Sora. "I apologize. Not just for the decree, though that was wrong. I apologize for believing that following rules was more important than saving lives. I apologize for pride that cost billions their safety and thousands their lives. A new resolution was presented. It passed without a single opposing vote. Earth was granted full military cooperation rights. The decree was abolished. Human forces were welcome in Council space. Ambassador Taemin stood to accept, but he declined the medal they tried to give him. We did not do this for recognition. We did it because it was right. That is the only reward we need. Captain Dong Hyen and his crew returned to Earth quietly. There were no parades, no celebrations. They simply went home, carrying their dead with them, and tried to sleep in beds that felt too safe.